So we started a series last week called Trading Places. And I'll just give a little bit of review what we looked at last week on Trading Places. And we're going to look at today a little bit around the spot of trading hurt for healing. And too many people have left church because of church hurt. And it's a real thing, but it's not the only reason people leave. There's most of the time, as we looked at last week, the reason people aren't in church is more just life got too busy. And you get out of the habit. And as we talked about last week, trading the couch or the television to be in person is because that's the way God created it to be. But when we're at home by ourselves and we're just sitting on the couch and then we have tragedies that come up in our lives, or we get a bad report, or, life happens to all of us. Honestly, then at that point, who do you have to carry you? Because we all need people to carry us at times. As much as we all love, the Bible says in Galatians 6, it says, carry and help with each other's burdens. Every one of us in this room at times will need that same help. But if we're just at home by ourselves, there's no one there to help carry those burdens and to help us through the challenges that life can bring. And so that's why last week, we looked at how life just happens and gets busy. It's like when you move to a new place. Studies show that if you're not involved in a church somewhere between 6 months and a year, it will be 5 years before you find a church to really get back involved. You'll just be away. And most of us just don't wake up and go, you know what, I'm just not going to serve God anymore, or this or that. It's just kind of a slow fade. We get out of the habit. We get busy. If you're at that age where you have kids, they get into sports, this, that, and the other. And then all of a sudden we quit coming. And then when we want to come back, sometimes we feel guilty. And it's like, well, I don't want to come back because I don't want to walk in the door and the greeters go, where have you been? Or you find someone, your friends, well, where have you been? It's about time. And sometimes I think the best thing we can just do is just say this and just say, how have you been? Instead of where have you been? What's wrong with you? Because most people know already inside. But we can be, more judgmental. And people leave because they're going through a hard time, and they deal with church hurt because, they're maybe not at their best, or somebody says something very inappropriate and it shouldn't have done that. And all of a sudden, those people leave. And here's the thing is that people tend to ignore the places they've gotten hurt. But the church is the crowd. Jesus isn't the crowd. And when we do that, we're removing ourselves from the person who can help us. And that's what Satan wants to do. He wants to make sure you get offended. He wants to make sure you get busy. He wants to do all these things to keep you away from the help you need. And he's a master at it. He's just really good at those things. But most of the time, we're just so busy. We just get out of the habit of it. So that's what we looked at last week. But how many times, too, do we quit church because we just get upset at somebody or get offended? And it's sad to say, but sometimes some parents kind of get upset because of the rules we have in children's. If you don't have your tag, you can't pick your kid up. You mean I got to walk all the way back down? But I've been coming for 12 years. You know me. I get it. But you got to have your tag because it's safety. But what we don't know is, we don't know if you're having a fight with your spouse and all of a sudden you're in a divorce, and all of a sudden now one of the parents isn't supposed to have the kids, and the dad shows up and they walk up there, or the mom, and they're like, Daddy, and you have no tag. And we don't know those things, so we have to have these things in place. But don't get upset. Just how about be glad we're watching out for you and your kids? Yeah, it's inconvenient. But at times, you need to be for protection and safety. And these things are important, but don't get offended and leave. or get upset about these things. But we'll tend to, we have a bad relationship or marriage. It's like, I'm never getting married again. But if you're lonely, maybe you should think about it again. But we can get hurt. And think of it this way, another illustration. How many of you in this room have ever hurt, like you rolled your ankle, you twisted it, you hurt it, you hurt something, you had a cast on, whatever. And after a few weeks, a month, whatever, it heals. But have you ever noticed you kind of will still kind of guard that, even though it's fine? Or, sometimes people will still limp and it's fine. But it's like your body wants to protect it. There's a great book out there. It's called Leading with a Limp. Everybody gets hurt, and we all lead with a limp. We're all going to have things that happen to us. But what happens is that we protect that, and we have that limp, and we still think that I'm trying to protect myself and guard it. And as long as you're guarding it and living your life that way, you're guarding yourself from ever opening up for relationship because you're afraid you might get hurt again. And honestly, that just hurts you. It just hurts you and me. You're staying away from where you need help. Now let's share a story with you. How many remember the Buffalo Bills safety, Damar Hamilton, about 2-3 years ago when few of you? So on a Monday night football game, one of the players on the Buffalo Bills, he made a tackle, he got up, and when he did, he collapsed and had a cardiac arrest. His heart stopped right on the field. And they had to, of course, revive him right on the field. The whole game stopped. And all over the news, everywhere, it was pray, 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 pray. And it's so interesting how quickly people who don't believe in prayer begin to pray and want prayer. Because deep down in our heart, we really know the truth. And so he lived. But about 10 months later, he came back to the same place he got hurt. And he met all the doctors and the trainers and everybody, and just celebrated that, he made it and he was alive. But here's the thing. He went back basically to the same place that he had a horrible experience. And it wasn't that God brings us back to places to teach us, to keep us hurting. Sometimes he's got to bring us back close to places because he wants to rewrite our lives moving forward. And all of us in this room have areas that because of hurt, we refuse to go back to fix. But until we go back and deal with it, God can't rewrite our future. That's why relationships, people get married 2, 3, 4, 5 times, is because they just think the next one will be different, and it's never the same because you just are still there. And why? Because you didn't rewrite what had happened and what caused it. So you can never move forward. And this is what God's really good at. God's really good at helping us in our lives to rewrite our past. But you can't avoid everything that has hurt you. You got to go back and hit it head on. And you have to overcome it and look at it. 1 Kings 19:15. Some of you might know this story about Elijah. See, Elijah was hurt. Some people think when you look at Elijah, he was so up and down that maybe he was bipolar. He had issues, you could say. And so all these problems are happening. And what does Elijah do? Elisha runs away. Now remember, Elisha ran once by the power of God and he outran the chariots. But then in his own ability, when something was going wrong, he went and ran and he hid under a tree and he was exhausted and wanted to die. And then birds came and fed him. And then he kept going into the wilderness. Many times when we try to do our own strength and then we do it on ourselves and we leave God out of it, we're leading ourselves into the wilderness and it wasn't God. Then not only did he go out into the wilderness, he went and hid in a cave. And anytime you want to isolate yourself and hide, that's an indication. When you don't want to be around people, it's an indication you're dealing with something when you want to be in isolation. And so he's in a cave, and all of a sudden God, says, Elijah, what's going on? And he tells him to come out of the cave, and there's the wind, and there's the lightning, and there's all these different things. And it says, and God speaks to him and says, I'm not in any of that, but the still small voice. But that was in verse 15 when he said that. He said, after the still small voice, God says, go back the way you came. Go back and go to the desert of Damascus. But in verse 9 and 13, the Lord asked Elijah, why are you in the cave? What are you doing here? And you know what his answer was? A pity party. Both times. Well, Lord, it's just hard and people don't believe like I believe. And twice he had the same response to God. And then God said, no, I'm with you, but you got to go back. And there are times where we have to go back and face where we ignored and we left before we can move forward and get the victory. Not all the time, but there's going to be times that you just can't just ignore like it didn't happen, but you have to face it. You have to deal with it in our lives. And so when you have a room full of people, we're all human. We're going to make mistakes. And sometimes we don't have the best days. And we're grumpy and we're irritable and all those different things. And the sad thing about it is sometimes some people leave the family of God because of the family of God. How many have a family like that? Don't raise your hand. But see, Psalms tells us in verse 34, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and save those whose spirits are crushed. God wants to redeem your life. He wants to heal your life. Now, if I ask for a show of hands, and some of you in this room, sometimes you've had very loud experiences where you got hurt. Maybe you were in a church and something bad happened. But those always happen across the country. You hear about them. But they're not just, they happen, but they're not the big things. You know what's usually the reasons we get hurt? Is because we just think people didn't recognize when we were hurting. You're carrying weights, you're carrying problems, and you just feel like nobody reached out to you, nobody asked you, nobody helped you. But please remember, sometimes you need to what? You need to ask for help to get help. You just can't think people are just going to know. You have to reach out. You do need to ask for help, and it's okay. Reach out. Ask for help. But you know what I like about Psalms 34:2 is this. It says that Jesus said he was close to the brokenhearted that are hurting. He didn't say he was close to the ones who hurt you. So please remember that God does notice and care when there is injustices done. But we can't let those injustices ruin our lives and let it control our lives and keep us away from what God wants to do. And then I will just talk about this just for a second, and that is this. Don't let the wound lie to you. Pain lies. Wounds lie. And what does it mean? Now here, the pain's real, but pain lies about its future. Wounds lie about the future. Here's a few things that in our lives, not just in church, but I'm talking in general, with our home, just our own personal lives. How many people have thought this? You don't belong. You just don't belong. Next one is this. God must be like those people. I'm not going there. If this happens because they're Christians, maybe God's this way. Another one is simply this. You are too damaged. You can't be in church. You disqualify yourself. You've had this happen or that happen or too many times, or you know what, you've been divorced, so you're just no one's ever going to love you again, or whatever it is. We have all these things that go through our minds that can hurt us and keep us away from the help we need. And we got to understand God's the redeemer of these things. Here's maybe another thought people have. You will never be safe again. Maybe you were abused in a relationship. Now, there are times you absolutely don't go back to people. You forgive them, but you don't have to ever do it personally. Don't ever think you have to personally go back and forgive somebody, because you don't. There are instances you do. You just have to forgive them. Because there's cases where Jesus said he didn't commit himself to all men, because he knew the heart of men. And there's times you absolutely have to protect yourself and stay away from people. That's why I said on occasions there's times where you need to go back to certain things, but not everything. And if you were hurt and abused and came out of a relationship that way, and now the fear of that and the lies that you're just bad and no one can love you again, and maybe that is what you were told over and over and over again from that abusive person and different things, that just isn't true. You can move on. You can move forward. Pain is real, but pain is not always truthful. As I said, because it lies about what's going to happen next. Don't listen to those lies. Right now in our country, one of the greatest things happening in our country is this. More people are taking their lives. More of the youth, because of COVID, more of the youth, I think, the depression stats, it's like 30%. Everything has gone up way more than it should. Along dysfunction, along isolation, along, mental health. And it is almost I won't say it's a pandemic, but it is affecting our kids greater than ever. This thing called, as we've said, Facebook and social media is isolation. So I have to talk about these things more than I've had to in the past, because it truly is a major problem nowadays in our society and in our lives. But how we respond to people needs to be. That's why we put a place where love works. Go outside. Everyone does the dishes. Mi casa es su casa. Authenticity. Those are all culture statements. That's our DNA. That's not what we want people to feel and experience when they come in here. And this is where you look at Jesus' life. Jesus always taught felt needs before doctrine. Because I could get up here and I could teach, eschatology, and I could teach all those different things. But Jesus never taught deep doctrine before he taught on felt needs. He talks about those that are in pain and weeping, and those that are hurt. And what did he always do? People that were hungry and hurting and alone. What did he always teach? He taught felt needs before he taught any deep doctrine. If I go to a doctor, I want him to tell me what's wrong. Hey, doc, help me out. This is what I'm going through in my life. When I walk into the doctor's office, I don't want him to spend 20 minutes talking about a new gadget that I can't understand that he just got in that can do all these amazing things. That's great. I'm great. You got this great doctor and this great machine. That's awesome. It can do all these different things, but I'm right here. I need your help. Right? And so when people show up, yes, we have to, just as Jesus. There are those things in our lives that we feel them. We deal with them. But at the same time, you can't ignore doctrine either. We have to know those things. Systematic doctrine, theology. But at the same time, God does care about, why am I saying this? Because he cares about what you're going through. He cares about the things in your life, the pain and the stuff that you're dealing with. But are we going to throw stones or are we going to throw grace? I guess is kind of the question that we should ask. Like when Jesus met the woman caught in adultery. Isn't it interesting? Same room, same group of people, but two different outcomes. Jesus stood in the gap, and the others wanted to throw stones. So a lot of the things, when we hear things and deal with things, if we also want to be careful and be a place where love works and be a place where there's grace and hope, Jesus didn't deny the sin. He just met her at a point of, hey, I can redeem and restore your life. He didn't say, oh, just keep living the way you are. But he also didn't throw stones at her. He said, now what? Go and now learn the doctrine. But I'll give you grace and meet your need. But then you got to leave and start learning the doctrine and start living it. And that's what he wants from each one of our lives. And we should be that way more and more and more. We all have failures. We all make mistakes. But what are we doing to get better every single year? And here's another good thought, is simply this. I always love it when non-Christians try to tell me what God is like. Have you ever had that happen? And sometimes, what's funny is sometimes there's some truth into it because I think people know the way people should be. But be careful, you're not letting other people control you that have nothing to do with knowing what God is like. Or using it to control you. Because people will do that. And then let me end with this thought. I have enough time today. Is I want to tell you about Peter and Jesus. And this is really interesting because I never really saw this before. Because Peter denied Jesus. He cussed. He completely went back to his old way of life. But in John 21, verse 9, listen to this. It says, when they had landed, they saw the fire of burning coals with the fish on it. Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Why is this so important? Because do you remember when Peter denied Jesus? He was standing in a courtyard around a fire. When he walked away from him, when he cursed him, he walked away ashamed, denied his faith, denied everything that night around that fire. Why did Jesus use the same coal and the same fire when he brought Peter back? It's only mentioned in these two spots, those burning coals. It was bring him back to the place of his failure to redeem him. How many of you know smell is a powerful force? More than anything. And when he went to redeem Peter's life, he brought him back to the same smell. same place, to those coals. But this time, they had a completely different meaning. Food, redemption. When you look at the Greek word and you study that coal fire, it means this. My study says this. It appears only twice in the New Testament, once at Peter's denial and once at Peter's restoration. Jesus built the same kind of fire on purpose. This is what my commentary says. He recreated the setting of failure, not to shame Peter, but to heal him. The first fire, Peter traded loyalty for safety. The second fire, Jesus helped him trade shame for calling. That's why the 3 denials. I love you. He gave the same answer. Feed my sheep. Isn't it fun that he didn't go back to review all his mistakes? It was redemption to move him forward. What was he saying? There's still a calling and still a purpose in your life.